Greetings. In this Future Transform recording, we explore how academics can best do climate change work in a very challenging situation. Our guest is Duke University's superb Toddi Steelman, who gives us first a really great sense of the important work that university is doing. And then, second, she helps us think through how academics as a whole, everyone from students, faculty, staff, senior administrators, can best work on climate change and global warming in what is a very challenging situation. I think you'll find the conversation that follows to be very sensitive, thoughtful, wide ranging, and deeply informed. I hope you find this useful and inspiring. Yeah. Let me welcome everybody. Welcome to the Future Transform. I'm so glad to see you all here today. We have a terrific guest, and we are talking about one of the great subjects of our time. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. What we're talking about today is climate change, how to do climate action in higher education, and how to do so in an environment, if you'll excuse the pun, which is even more challenging than it was a year ago. Now, to join us, we have Toddi Steelman from Duke University. From my mind, she is one of the most optimistic and energetic activists for climate action in higher education, bar none. She's doing great work at Duke, and we want to hear all about that. But I also want to hear what she thinks about what we can do in order to really keep grappling with climate change as things continue. Vice President Steelman, welcome.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I am so excited to see so many people joined on this call. That's really exciting. I see some names I recognize and some that I don't. And a shout out to my friends in Canada. I spent 5 years at the University of Saskatchewan as the original executive director or dean of the School of Environment and Sustainability since. And so Canada, very near and dear to my heart. So love seeing my Canadian friends here.
Excellent. Well, I second that shout out. And again, Vice President Steelman, I'm very glad that you could join us. I know how busy your schedule must be, especially now at the start of the academic year. So thank you for making the time.
Truly my pleasure.
We have a practice here in the forum where we don't ask people to introduce themselves by talking about what they have done, because we've already sent out all kinds of emails and information about that. But what we do is, because this is the Future Transform, we'd like to know what you see yourself doing for the next year. What are the big projects, themes, and topics for you?
Great question. So at Duke, we have something called the Duke Climate Commitment. I'm going to give a little bit of background just as a prelude to understand why we're going to be doing what we're going to be doing this year. So in 2022, our President Price, said that we would turn the attention of the university to focus on climate change, which basically meant taking our entire mission, research, education, operations, community partnerships, external engagement, and force it through the prism of climate and sustainability to try to demonstrate what a university can do, when tackling a large global issue. So over the last 2 years, we've been, so in 2023, he asked me to take on this brand new vice president, vice provost role. At the time, I was serving as dean of the Nicholas School of the Environment. He asked me to step out of that role into this new position, which I was eager to do because I like a really great challenge. And trying to do this across an entire university was really provocative to me. So, and I knew it would be filled with all sorts of joys as well as heartaches. But that's where the good challenges lie. Over the last 2 years, our Office of Climate and Sustainability, has put together what we're calling our 2030 strategy. And because 2030 feels like a long ways off, especially given some of the dynamism, I'll say, that we are all living with these days. We have a 3-year plan that we've just rolled out, and so that's what we're working on. And I'm going to layer that on top, Brian, of the fact that no secret that higher education has been hit pretty hard here in the United States by the Trump administration. So at Duke, we've just gone through a pretty considerable round of budget cutbacks and layoffs. And so it means we're all doing everything we would like to be doing with less. And so in order to set up our team for success, that means we need to do some radical prioritization, because really important for me that our team and the university feels a sense of accomplishment by the time we get to the end of the academic year. I don't want to overload them in a way that just says you have to do everything. I feel like leadership's responsibility is to prioritize for your team and say, what we're really going to lean into this year is our climate fluency goals. So now I get to answer your actual question, Brian.
Mhm.
At one of the things we have carved out for ourselves that we want to create climate fluency across the entire institution. And I can really dig into the details on that further. And in order to do that, I really want our staff focusing. We've got 4 pilot schools this year, Pratt School of Engineering, our School of Nursing, our Sanford School of Public Policy, and portions of Trinity Arts and Sciences. That's our biggest college, and spans everything from the humanities to social sciences to the physical sciences to the biological sciences. And so those are our pilots for this year, and I really want that's an area within the institution over which we have a lot of control. Given the external environment is a lot more challenging, it's an area where we can really push forward this year and so see what we can do. The second area is really on our operations front. Again, another area where we have a lot of internal control. And so really trying to prioritize what we can do on our campus this year. Have some big moves that we are working on there, including creating a scope 1 and 2 net zero plan that will take us out to 2050.
Mm.
And we're in the process of making some really big changes on campus, reprioritizing how we're doing things, I think, in pretty special ways. And then the third thing is that we're really reimagining our research endeavors. We know that the business model on which R1 institutions is changing because federal grants, especially in
Mm.
the sustainability, climate, energy, environment realm, may be less available. I think we're starting to see signals of that, but we're also going through the budget process now through our federal processes. And so what does it mean for us to continue to push forward in key areas in research while imagining new sets of partners for us, whether from the nonprofit world, the philanthropic world, and private industry? So I'm doing a big restructure of what our research component will be in our office as we move forward. So those are 3 sort of top areas, Brian. 2 big priorities for us to push forward on internally, and then 1 sort of area of reorganization and rethinking.
I would love to ask about each of those, and maybe if we have time, we can do that. I love the phrase climate fluency, which I think is a really really powerful one. In the chat box, Karen Costa added a link about the political context of North Carolina.
Mhm.
So thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen, for that.
Yes. I mean, I would just say, we live in a purple state. We have for those who might not be familiar with North Carolina, our governor and our, is a Democrat, but our legislature is pretty strongly Republican. I think that's really healthy for us in terms of how we think about priorities and where we situate some of the work that we do. I think it forces us to a kind of pragmatism that is healthy, and I think we actually need more of. And so, a good example of this is that our president's cabinet. So I'm a member of both the president's cabinet and the provost cabinet. Our
Right.
president's cabinet went to Fort Bragg 2 weeks ago to visit with the folks down there and try to understand what kind of partnerships we might better have with the folks down there. We traditionally do a lot of work down there, but we don't typically send the whole president's cabinet down there. And so, I think a really strong signal of where we want to see future partnerships and how we want to have presence, in our home state. And military installations here are a big part of that. And
Sure.
military installations have traditionally been on the forefront of preparing, doing excellent work around climate change, resiliency, and adaptation as well. So a lot of really good room for partnership there.
Indeed, indeed. Thinking about climate change as an accelerant for geopolitical threats, trying to decarbonize the enormous fossil fuel footprint of the military, trying to think about how to provide civilian assistance to civilian life in case of. Oh, that's terrific. Thank you, Toddi.
Mhm.
If you're new friends to the Future Trends Forum, I'm just going to ask another question, but then it's going to be over to all of you with your questions and topics. So please think what you'd like to ask our guest, and especially as she and I speak, if there's anything in particular that really stands out, please don't be shy. We're here all about the kind of conversation. Um, I'd like to ask a practical question aimed at kind of all of higher education around the world, which is, do you have any suggestions for how we can best do climate work in this openly hostile political climate? And it's openly hostile in the United States. It varies from country to country depending on where you go. But I think overall, as things become more challenging, just to give one small example, um, a couple of months ago, the online publisher asked me to write for their newsletter, and I wrote just a page of content, and addressing a whole bunch of different issues in higher education. And they were back and said, "This is fine, this is terrific, except we're going to delete the parts about climate change." I said, "What? Were they wrong?" And they said, "No, no, no. We just don't want to offend our audience." Their audience wasn't Fox News; it was a general audience as a whole. And my contact people said this came from corporate. And this is one small example.
Mhm.
But what advice do you give for all of us to
Sure.
work?
I think that if I sort of look around, the results I see are mixed. In the United States,
Mm,
there is no doubt that we are facing roadblocks and pushback and rollbacks in terms of climate, our ability to do climate work. You can look at the numerous federal actions that have been taken, and pulling out of the Paris Accord, the Unleashing American Energy executive orders that have come down the road, the current efforts by the Trump administration on the endangerment findings, and the defunding and destabilizing climate science across a whole variety of agencies, just for a few examples. That's very demoralizing for anybody that's doing work in this area because hey, we spend our lives, we care very passionately about this. We want to see progress. I think we all felt like under the Biden administration, we had a lot of really terrific momentum, and we're seeing a lot of reversals there. So, let's call it what it is. It's disappointing and demoralizing. In other countries, I'm going to come back to that. In other countries, so we have two campuses, one in Singapore and one in China. So I am there at least once a year. And I can tell you in both of those countries, it is, all forward. And
mm,
I
mm,
really enjoy interacting with our friends, both in Singapore and in China, and, seeing what they are doing when you've got governments, albeit authoritarian governments, who are all in on the effort. So, that doesn't come without its own complications when we think about the role of democracy. So I don't want to shortchange that. But it is really nice to be, in countries where those priorities are still very alive and well. I was also in London for London Climate and Action Week in June, and meeting with a whole variety of folks, not only in the UK, but from across Europe. And there's a lot of interest that still is very, very much alive and well. I think that what we are witnessing internationally is a resetting and perhaps of priorities. And some of that is coming with, it's insufficient to have only climate and sustainability driving business. You have to continue to make the business case for why you're doing this work. It doesn't solely rest on the business case. It can be a combination of the two things. But what I was hearing, at least in London over the summer, was like, we've just got to make a stronger business case for why this makes sense. It's not that
mm,
you're backing
mm,
away from it. Climate risks haven't changed. In fact, they've become more material to the bottom line questions of what a lot of companies are wrestling with. But I think there's a different recalculation of the focus. I personally think that that is good news, because business being business, if they can focus on the bottom line and make it work while also
mm,
moving in a more climate sustainability, decarbonization, energy friendly world,
mm,
um, I think that gives the whole movement greater momentum in the long run. So,
mm, mm,
so that's my take on it. Happy to have a conversation about that. And then coming back to the U.S., what I would say is that, yep, national picture is grim. But we have states, we have localities, and we have universities. that can still exercise a lot of independence in terms of what we want to do. And so I think that's where we have to lean in. Some states are being constrained, some are not. There's still a lot of work to do, I think, in localities. And I think as universities, we have a lot of opportunity. So I think each of us has the potential to be looking in our own backyards of where we're working to say, where can we make a difference? Where can we have some impact? And it's one of the things we talk about with our students as we try to create climate fluency. We know that this generation has a lot of anxiety, a lot of, depression. They are truly worried about the future, and it's easy to understand why. And they're not wrong to be worried about the future. But I feel like the best way you combat those narratives of despair is by really leaning into the opportunities that we have to create agency and change. And we have enormous opportunities to do that on our own campuses. Get them
Mm,
involved in projects on our own campuses and show them how they can actually make a difference.
mm. Thank you for that optimism, as well as that clear-eyed realism, looking at this. You remind me of in November, the great climate scientist Michael Mann said, it looks like China is becoming an electro-state, where the US is becoming more of a petro-state.
Yes.
But that's at the national level. Again, as you said, we have cities, we have universities, we have states where differences are there and the openings are there. Um, in the chat, Becca Davidson asked for clarification. If you could elaborate on what you mean by climate fluency.
Hmm. Climate fluency, I think, conveys that we are key, and I can drop in the chat sort of, we've got a whole framework for this. And so I'll drop those in the chat as soon as I get a moment here. The intention there is basically we want to create an appropriately climate fluent student population. And that means that the way you would become climate fluent as an engineer is going to be very different than the way you would become climate fluent as a nurse. A nurse is going to have to think about, for instance, the heat impacts on a pregnant or new mother. An engineer is going to have to think about what are the potential climate impacts on creating more resilient infrastructure if we have a higher incidence, higher probability of natural disasters and building to withstand those kinds of natural disasters. So in every profession, in every major, I defy you to find somewhere where climate and sustainability is not relevant. And so then the question becomes, how do we educate our students um, in appropriate ways so that they can enter into their careers or their next professional steps with the appropriate amount of training, information that will truly inform their ability to be effective as citizens and as professionals. So we are trying to grow up our version of climate fluency in each school. So it's a combination top-down, bottom-up effort where we need to hear from each of the schools how they imagine this taking place. Um, Engineering and nursing are actually really good examples because each engineer and nursing have accreditation requirements
Mm-hmm.
that make this
Mm-hmm.
a little bit easier in some ways, whereas public policy and our departments in Trinity Arts and Sciences don't. So I think about it as having hard paths where you have to meet the accreditation requirements, and softer paths where we're going to have to find different ways. So, for instance, in arts and sciences, our approach right now is to identify the highest enrollment courses that we have for our first year students. That's
Mm-hmm.
things like biology 101, chemistry 101, computer science 101, econ 101, psychology 101,
Mm-hmm.
and insert modules into each of those courses that are climate relevant. So you don't have to tackle it head on. The question is, how do you train that group of faculty to feel confident enough to insert a module? And our approach this year is to have one key problem around which those modules will be generated, and extreme heat has been where we're doing that. So we're trying
Oh,
to take
nice.
a coordinated approach so that if students are in, we're just getting this started, so miles to go, mind you. If a student in biology is looking at extreme heat on habitat, they also might be hearing about extreme heat in an economics problem set as well.
Sure. in sociology and urban studies.
You got it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for elaborating. Becca follows up by asking if how do you create climate fluency, even climate awareness, among faculty?
Hmm. So we've had two paths forward there. I'm just going to see if I can find our climate fluency framework. I'm gonna be working on that here on the side while I'm talking to you. Okay, so remind me what the question was, Brian.
That's okay. A question that Becca asked was, how can you build climate fluency and even climate awareness among faculty in particular?
So we have two approaches there, and you guys can still hear me, can't you? I think I'm freezing up, but you're okay. Okay, sorry about that.
Your visual is frozen, but your voice is coming through.
Looking good on the visual too. Um, so two approaches there. One is we know we have faculty who, on one hand, really want to do a deep dive and enhance what they do. So we have a CAST fellowship, Climate and Sustainability Teaching Fellowship.
Mm.
Summer, they will do an intensive workshop um, where we have subject matter specialists, both in terms of teaching as well as in climate science, who are working with them to sort of create a whole new class. And then we have another opportunity where the training is really around just developing a module that somebody who doesn't want to do a full class, they just want to insert something into an existing class, so a module. Those are the two ways that we have gone about doing it so far. And we are sort of revisiting through these new pilot programs what the schools really want, what would be most helpful to them. So I think, I mean, that's what we've done so far. Very
Yeah.
much open to insight from our good friends in the four pilot schools to help us understand how we might better meet those needs as well.
Oh, that's a fantastic answer. Becca, thank you for the great question, which is one that I wrestle with myself. Toddi, there's a lot going on there, and I would love to hear more about this. In the chat, Karen Costa says that she does some of this as her faculty development work, and she shared a link to her resources there, so people don't miss that. Questions are starting to come in, and I want to an observation as well. Our dear friend Ed Webb at Dickinson College says this, that local action is helpful if limited. His college students have helped their county and borough develop resilience plans, although the county is more conservative than the borough, so less receptive. I'm going to put in the chat a link to Dickinson College's sustainability effort, which is definitely one of the leading ones in the U.S., if not the world. They're really they have a wonderful leader with Nick, and they've done great projects. Everything from a campus organic garden to having a sustainability requirement for graduation. It seems, Toddi, that it helps to have D as the first letter of your name if you're a university or college doing climate work. Um, Bravo to Ed and to the entire Dickinson team. He also shared a link to a workshop about building sustainability knowledge among faculty. So we've got that. Um, Friends, by the way, speaking just on a meta note, I'm trying something new here. I post all the recordings of our sessions to YouTube. Right now, we've got about 450. What I'm starting to do is add links that come up in the chat to the show notes in YouTube. So if you'd like me to do that, please let me know. If you don't want me to do that, let me know. But I think that's a good way to keep some of this wonderful knowledge that we're harvesting here and to keep it going. We have another question that comes from Karen Costa, who says both of these examples, they sound like dealing with climate change rather than a more activist stance to prevent and mitigate additional negative impacts. Is there a prevention component of climate fluency too, such as fossil fuel reduction as a most obvious example?
That's great. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, good, because my Zoom is doing some funky things here on my end. I'm glad you could still hear me. Okay, great.
your voice is good. Why don't you just turn off your camera,
Okay.
Zoom, and then turn it back on again?
I can't even do that right now.
Whoa.
There's the spinning wheel of death
Oh
happening
no.
for me.
Okay,
So we'll see if it upholds. But as long as you can hear me, that's good. And as soon as I can get back to that, I will turn off my camera.
great.
Um,
Thank you.
so one of the things I was trying to paste into the chat was our uh, sort of the logic behind our climate fluency work. And so we call it the 4C pathway. And so it's understand the context, understand the causes, understand the consequences, and then how do you become a catalyst for change? And as soon as I can post into the chat, I will put this link in there for you to see. And so I think the idea there is that we want a comprehensive approach.
Oh dear, I think we just lost Toddy. Um, so I think this is time for a hard relaunch of Zoom or perhaps a reboot of her machine. Um, so while Toddy is wrestling with that, and my heart goes out to her for how this goes. Um, in the chat, Ed says Skynet doesn't want us to talk. That may be the influence of it. Um, uh, Heather Clark is looking for a write-up about climate fluency, which is very, very good. Hope to see that. In the chat, someone asked a question about AI, and I wanted to just, if I could, share a presentation I gave earlier this week. Um, about AI and climate change on campuses. So I'll put that in the chat if anybody is curious. You can take a look at that. I hope to share it in a more formal way soon.
All right, I think I'm back again. Sorry about that.
Hey, we can hear you. You sound good.
Very good. And I lost all the chat, unfortunately. So
Oh, it's okay. That's what I'm here for.
very sorry
Uh,
for that. And I just dropped into the chat the fluency framework that we have. And so everybody should be able to access
Excellent,
that on our website.
excellent. Thank you for wrestling with that.
You
Uh,
bet.
and and everybody again, I don't think you folks are shy. I think people have a lot of energy here they want to share, and I just have to say, uh, perhaps on a personal level, it does my heart good to see so many of you here thinking about climate change in higher education, coming together and bringing your thoughts, your aspirations, and your work together is, I think, one of the most important things we can do right now. In the in the chat, Claire Betas, and Claire, I hope I didn't completely destroy your last name. She asks about a very important topic. How has your office been thinking about the AI and climate change in the context of higher education? Do you
Great,
anticipate that this will be part of climate fluency education for students at your institution or others?
great question. Very complicated along several dimensions, as you can imagine. I think so. On one hand, we've got a provost initiative that is sort of delving into multiple dimensions associated with AI and how we deal with AI on campus. And one of the working groups, there are four working groups in that, and one of them is AI and sustainability.
Mm,
We have of course, our office has representation on that committee, but it's a whole, we take faculty governance very seriously. And so, and staff are a big part of that too. So our staff sit on that committee. That's just gotten started. So more to come out on that, but I can assure you that there are, I think on one hand, second thing I would mention is that we're building a new data center on campus because in order to meet our faculty needs for GPUs, it's really important for their research projects. So we are going through the very live experience of the joys and heartaches of building a data center, including
wow.
trying to identify um, how sustainable we can make it. And that's been challenging, and we're continuing to really push on that. The third thing I would mention is we know that AI is an enormous energy hog, especially with these huge data centers. I mean, ours is a 1.5 megawatt center. It pales in comparison to these other sorts of ones. So very different scale in terms of what's being proposed in other places
Sure.
that put enormous loads on our grids, sometimes in front of the meter and sometimes behind the meter in terms of the designs that are going in. So we know that that AI is going to have some really detrimental impacts when it comes to carbon and climate. But we also know that AI is going to be a potentially powerful tool in addressing climate change. It can handle enormous models. It will probably be able to help us identify patterns that will be a lot harder for humans to do alone. So I think there are potential scientific gains that we can get with AI that can also be potentially helpful to us. So how that kind of works, either pro or con, has yet to shake out, but we know that there are two sides to that equation. And we know it's coming. So I think, the question is how do we best wrestle with those complexities? And universities are great places for us to be tackling those issues head on.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you for that very thoughtful reply. In the chat, we've had examples of both sides that you're talking about. Karen Costa says she's frustrated by the calls to educate students about AI that focuses on good writing prompts and not about the climate impacts, particularly horrible for Black and Brown communities. And in response, Judith Sebesta says, "Call me an AI Pollyanna. I hold out hope that AI can help save us from climate impacts." So it's good to see all of us aligned on that, if you will. Thank you for the excellent question, by the way. We have another question that's coming in, and this is from someone who couldn't be here today. So I wanted to ask this on his behalf. This is from Don Shawless of the Higher Education Inquirer, and he asks this: Can you discuss the dangers of even talking about this issue under Trump? And he mentioned surveillance.
Mm.
I mean, obviously this is a kind of meta question since they're asking to talk about talking. But Don asks a very heartfelt question. What are the risks that we face in doing this work now?
Sure. I think that there's an enormous amount of work that we can all be doing. And I think at least the advice that I've given our staff and how I have been approaching it is there are lots of things we can continue to do without poking the bear and making ourselves a target. And I am mostly interested in doing the work and getting the work done. And so if I have to shift my language to talk about safety and health and resilience and abundance,
Mm,
I'm going to do that.
mm,
And it's really important. And I've been really, I keep saying, a world that proactively addresses climate change will be a safer world, a more resilient world, and a more abundant world for all. Right. And so I think it's hard to take us to task for addressing equity when using the same words that are in the Pledge of Allegiance. So, the, I think it's just a matter of sticking to your guns in terms of what it is you really want to accomplish. And I ask myself that every day, like, what is it I am trying to accomplish here? And what's the best way for us to get down the path to do that thing? Let's not get hung up on the semantics. Let's not get hung up on the politics, as frustrating as they can be. There are just many ways for us to keep pushing forward. And I feel if we do it in common sense, reasonable, pragmatic, practical ways, it makes it a lot harder to make yourself a target.
is sustainability a good word for us to use?
Sure. I think that's a great word.
Sustainability, safety, resilience. So the language shift helps a lot. And if in the chat anyone wants to suggest any words or phrases that they have found especially safe, or if there are any phrases they want us to avoid, please please let me know. Um, uh, and our friend Karen says that she struggles with this because she doesn't want to be too conciliatory. As she puts it, quote, fascism's appetite is unrelenting, unquote. Also in the chat, friends, if you haven't seen it, Toddi has shared several different links, including the link on AI and sustainability, and another one on hyperscale loads, which I'm really looking forward to reading both of those.
Yeah, we've done a couple of papers recently, and I can't find the one we just released on AI and sustainability. So I'm going to keep hunting for that and try to drop it in there. But we've done load growth management work, right? So, I mean, your first best
Mm.
option is efficiency savings, right? And so
Oh,
we've had an, a paper that I've dropped in there, the load growth management one, that's had a lot of attention just in terms of how do we keep moving forward. Um, given the constraints that we face. And then last December, we did an event at Brookings Institution on AI and climate and sustainability that I also dropped in there into the chat.
Very nice. Thank you. And whoop, hopefully I don't get a sudden burst of audio. Ed Webb shared a podcast, which is called appropriately the AI, Energy, and Climate Podcast. So thank you, Ed. That's pretty straightforward on this. We may circle back to this topic because this is one of a great deal of interest. Michael Higgins asks this question, and it's always good to see you, Michael. How does your office interact with the operations, design, and construction functions of the institution? I think the institution means Duke University as a whole.
I am sorry, I was trying to find this link and I
Oh,
missed the
quite all
question.
right. Quite all right. Multitasking is fun. Michael asks, how does your office interact with the operations, design, and construction functions of Duke University?
Another really great question. So we have two places where that work takes place at Duke. One is through what was previously our Office of Sustainability, which is now part of the office that I run, the Office of Climate and Sustainability. So we have incorporated the Office of Sustainability into our office. And then the other place where a lot of that work takes place on campus is facilities management. And we have very, very close working relationships with facilities management. So one of the things that I'm most excited about in terms of decarbonization efforts on campus is that we have really turned our attention to renewal. Instead of, tearing down and building new, we are investing like tens of millions of dollars into renewing our existing buildings on campus,
Hmm.
so that we preserve that embodied carbon. And then
Mhm.
we go in and make our existing, facilities, which are, in some cases quite old, incredibly efficient. New lighting, new HVAC systems, we're converting from steam to hot water, which is also a really big energy savings in these buildings. And so, how can we make our existing infrastructure as efficient as possible? And I'll tell you that it's often cheaper to tear down and build new than it is to go in and do these investments in
Hmm.
existing buildings. But
Hmm.
there is no doubt that the carbon savings, it's not very sexy to talk about it. But if you look at your campus, it's probably one of the biggest moves you can make on your campus in terms of decarbonization.
Makes a lot of sense. Uh, Michael is, for me, just one of my gurus about campus architecture and design. So I'm always glad to hear from him. In the chat, John Stites mentions that Georgetown University is converting from steam to hot water heat as well,
That's awesome.
which is good to see. I just anecdotally, Toddi, I found that people working on Michael's side of the house, architects, campus planners, chief operating officers tend to be much more engaged with, much more thoughtful about climate change than just about anybody else on campus, which makes sense given that the practical realities of what they have to do. In November, here I'll put a link to this. I'm talking to the Higher Education Facilities
Oh,
Forum
great. That's
about.
awesome.
We had two questions that beat as one. Karen asked a question, and Don Schullis again asked a question remotely about investment and divestment. Uh,
Mhm.
Don was interested in how to get universities to divest from fossil fuel holdings. And Karen is asking, how do you make sure that Duke is not investing in companies that are doing the most harm?
Yeah. So it's a complicated topic, not surprisingly, and I really don't like the divestment framing in it because it really locks us into very limited options when we think about what we can do with our endowments. And so like the question of divesting, I just don't find it very constructive, quite frankly. And that gets me in trouble sometimes. But let me
Mm,
explain why. So there are lots of things we can do with our endowments to create a more, sustainable, decarbonized future. And again, it kind of gets back to what are you trying to accomplish? Like, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to divest from companies? Are we trying to decarbonize the economy? And I think if we say we're trying to decarbonize the economy, it gives us a much bigger playing field to think about what our options are and how we put capital to use. I think there's also limited evidence in terms of whether divestment is effective or not. We did a very deep dive into the peer-reviewed literature. Um, and in some cases, divesting leads to either a company if you are a shareholder in a company, you have at least some limited influence over them. If you divest from them, you lose that option. Now, there are a few of us out there that have enough sway to actually exert that influence. So, in some ways, that's not a full argument. But if enough people divest, then the company basically has options to go out and do whatever it wants. And there is evidence in the
Hmm.
peer-reviewed literature that that's basically what happens in some cases. So I think, we're scholars. I think it's important, incumbent perhaps, that we go to the peer-reviewed literature and try to figure out, okay, what are the consequences of it so that we know we're doing the right thing. Alternatives like asking our endowments to invest more proactively in not just companies that are trying to move the needle in terms of decarbonization, I think is really important. So I think that's another way of reframing it.
Hmm.
We have been, so we, as I am sure is the case on your campus, our students and faculty are very interested in this question. So we, not last year, but the year before, we had a year-long seminar on mission. Mission related responsibility, which we have because we have a Duke climate commitment, and
Hmm.
fiduciary responsibility, which is where the endowments come into play.
Right.
So we spent a full year where we invited in guest speakers every month for 9 months on various sort of different topics. And at the end of that year, what we decided to do was to create a new course, lean into our research and educational superpowers, if you will, and work with DUMAC, that's our endowment, to try to understand if we could actually, we found that the biggest impediment to making progress was you cannot measure the carbon impact of an endowment. Um,
Hmm.
because of the way the endowment is made up, it's usually a fund of funds.
Hmm.
So you have multiple mutual funds, if you will, with traders that are working multiple movements in a day. So it's a very fast moving target in terms of how the system works. So very difficult to get your handle around what it actually looks like to decarbonize. If you start at a baseline, what would it look like in another year? So our research project, which is in collaboration with our endowment partners, is taking a very hard look at seeing if we could develop, using AI, a way to actually measure the carbon impact of a subset of some of our investments. And so if we could show proof of concept with that, then that would allow us to sort of begin to get firm metrics around what the current footprint is and then what it would mean to decarbonize it. So we finished that work last year. We had some successes and some failures. There was enough interest to continue the work into this year. So we're refining the algorithm that we developed and moving it into different parts of our investment portfolio. So I am personally quite eager to see if we can make progress here because if we can pilot a tool that works for us, it means it's going to work for a lot of other people as well.
Yeah.
And who knows where that's going to go. But I like the idea that, students and faculty wanted to lean into the research and education mission that we have. And I was really pleased to get buy-in from our endowment to do the work.
That's impressive to bring me down. And I also love the fact that you spent almost a year just researching and thinking hard about this question. Well, thank you, Karen and Don. Thank you for the very important question. Toddi, thank you for the very surprising and really interesting response. I hope you are able to publish a tool that you can share with the rest of us.
We are certainly hoping to move in that direction. As you can tell, like this work is still, it's coming. And that's one of the things I love about working at a university. I think we get to try on a lot of different things to see if they're going to work. And I think it's really important for us to share what works and what doesn't. And that's all part of the learning journey that we are all on. And, I would certainly say, and one of the things I always fear is that people think we've got it all figured out, which we certainly do not. I can assure you it is a battle every single day, with lots of joys and sorrows. And so, but I'm really committed to sharing the good stuff and the not so good stuff, um, in terms of what works and what doesn't.
One of the reasons we wanted to host you in the program. Friends, we're coming up in the last 10 minutes of our session together, and I want to make sure that everyone had a chance to share their thoughts and to put forward their questions. So please, the chat box is open, and if you would like to speak out loud, just click the raise hand button so I can see you. We have a question from Julia Michaels. Hello, Julia, who asks, are there any examples where universities have partnered with industry or local governments to help them address or mitigate some of their climate impacts?
Mm.
Educating the next generation of students is important, but I'm curious whether there are other ways universities can make a near-term impact.
Another lovely question. You've got such a great group here, Brian.
Indeed.
Um,
Indeed.
I, uh, I, um, uh, you know, we We have done a couple of different things, in terms of working with our local, like Durham. So Durham is in our backyard, and so is Beaufort, North Carolina, down in Carteret County, where our Marine Lab is located. So we've done a couple of different things, of course, all usually with our faculty driving it. So we have a program at Duke called Bass Connections that allows us to do active research projects in a variety of different settings, but one of our faculty members in biology for the last many years has done work with something called the Ellerbe Creek Watershed Association to work in partnership with that association in Durham to understand flooding and forecasting and what it means, for the city to do a little bit better planning around those, events. So, pairing our educational mission with needs in the local community, I think is really important. Another example is that we are working with Habitat for Humanity in Durham. We just had a grant program that we moved forward where we are building houses that are, more energy, efficient. So they would be building the houses anyway, but the increment of funding that we could bring to the projects was allowing those projects to be more energy efficient, right? Better windows, better, lighting and other sorts of systems. So trying to make improvements there, which also have the added on benefit of lowering your energy costs. So
Okay.
there's that. And then another example I would, put out there is that we have a really amazing project going on in Beaufort, North Carolina. So in 2018, 2019, we had back-to-back hurricanes, Hurricane Dorian,
Right.
and Florence, that hit, that part of the world. And, it's a very red county, I would say. And that's one of the, opportunities, I think, for us. And so to get out and do a lot more work in the communities post disaster was something that we really leaned into in terms of how we could be a good neighbor. But even beyond that, we have a really dynamic faculty member down there who does a lot of work with the Boys and Girls Club and with the local schools. And because of the back-to-back hurricanes, one of the things they were starting to see in the school system was the kids were having a lot of trouble just trying to figure out how do you bounce back from that. So in collaboration with the teachers, they created what they call the resilience curriculum, which really leaned into arts, and
Hmm.
creating what they called, these, books, basically these stories, these myths of, how you would become more resilient. And so they told stories about turtles and trees and, using the natural world about where
Hmm.
resilience naturally happens as sort of these
Hmm.
parables, for how you'd be resilient. So, it's been a marvelous success in a whole variety of ways. And then last year, as you will probably remember, Helene came through
Yeah.
Western North Carolina. I mean, truly devastating. And in the post of that disaster, we had teachers in Western North Carolina who had heard about this curriculum that then reached out to the teachers in the Marine Lab at the coast to say, hey, could we import that curriculum here, given what has just happened? And so now we've got it happening both on the East Coast and the in the Western Mountains here in North Carolina, that resilience curriculum. And I'm going to also try to see if I can find that link. It's a really nice story, I think, about how when we lean into our communities around us, we find a great sense of purpose. That's harder for some faculty than others because they've got a very different incentive structure. But I think that in the cases where we can't alter our incentive structures to do more work like that, it pays real dividends.
Oh, that's a really, really good story, and a set of findings. I'm glad to see that percolate across your state. Thank you for sharing that. We're coming up on the end of our hour, so I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to put forward some questions. Seth Fury observes or recommends that university procurement policies can be powerful. A lot of cities are using their procurement offices to encourage the circular economy in their communities. So that's a really good point, Seth. Thank you. Um, Eileen Frank asked a question, and this is Toddi, this is for everybody, I think. She's wondering if there's an OER, that is an open educational resource, textbook about climate change, divestiture, and higher education. And she's wondering if there is such a thing. Uh, Offhand, I have not seen such a thing. I may have missed one, but if anybody has a suggestion, please put that in the chat. And then James Boswell asks a question going back to climate fluency, and this is more on the aim of students. Toddy, what is the biggest obstacle in training or teaching students about climate fluency as part of their academic programs?
I think it's not going to be climate fluency isn't equally distributed in terms of interest across every student, right? There are some who are just not interested, and that's an A-OK thing to do. And I think our goal is like if we could achieve 80% fluency across the student population, I would call that victory. So I think it's being realistic about what your goals are and uh, what you are really trying to achieve. And so the goal, I think, is to hit a very high proportion of our students and then not beat yourself up about that 20% that I think is just going to be hard to reach. Faculty will be in that category as well. They're just, it's just not germane to what they're interested in, and I get that. And so I would rather spend my time on the, you know, 60% that are probably really interested in it and trying to figure out how we achieve that.
Yeah,
And then get that additional 20% to get up to 80%, as opposed to trying to get everybody on side. So I think the obstacles come in how do we find the right models that fit the right cultures of the disciplines within which we are working? How do we align incentive structures to achieve those objectives? Because they are currently not particularly well aligned to do that. So that's an obstacle. And then how do we find the funding to make sure that we are breathing life into the best ideas that people have about moving this forward? And fundraising in this environment, is a challenge for sure.
indeed, indeed it is. Thank you for saying that, Toddy. We've in the chat there are more links coming in, which is really, really helpful. So I really appreciate all of that, and I try to harvest as many of those as I can. I wanted to wrap things up, Toddy, in two ways. And the first is to ask you a bit of a futures question, which is imagine Duke in, say, 5 or 8 years from now, or imagine any other university that takes climate change really seriously, that has the kind of commitment that Duke has, and that has a wonderful paladin for climate action like Toddi Steelman. What, how do they stand apart from other schools that haven't done this? What does that campus look like in about 5 or 8 years?
If we get to where I would like us to go, it means that we will have buy-in from every corner of the campus. And I would hate to leave this this group with the idea that this is something that a leader alone can do, because there is no way that this happens without an army of people working to make it happen.
Mm,
So
mm,
that happens, with it's certainly faculty, staff, and students. We've got an enormous governance structure of 100 people aligned in four working groups, one on education, one on research, one on operations, and one on external engagement. And community partnerships threads its way across of everything that we do. And nothing would happen at Duke if we didn't have, those folks who then become our ambassadors out into the rest of the institution. So, we'll be successful when climate and sustainability is actually part of the water we drink and the air we breathe, right?
mm,
It's
mm.
no longer even something that we call out. It's just something we're doing everywhere. And so, in many ways, I think I'll be really successful if I work myself out of a job.
It sounds like what I've heard from other organizers that if you can make yourself irrelevant because the population has taken that up, made it part of the water and air they consume. Thank you, Tony. That's a great answer. I want to just in the chat share a couple of links along these lines. MIT has a day of climate action coming up that they're calling for proposals, so you can see that there. But also this very Sunday is actually the first Sun Day. This is a celebration of solar power. So if you go to that website, you can find out about Sun Day events near you, which you should definitely check out. And Bill McKibben's book about solar just came out as well, called Here Comes the Sun. So I strongly recommend that. I'm interviewing him for the blog right now, so I hope we get more information. Toddi, what's the best way for people to keep up with you and your work in all of this?
Sure.
Remember, come back. Good to see you.
I don't know how long it'll last, but we're in the final stages here. We have a website. I'll drop that into the chat. Follow us on LinkedIn, the Do Climate Commitment. I actively post on there just things that are going on, random thoughts that I have, activities that we have going on. I'll be at Climate Week next week. If anybody's going to be at Climate Week, very
Oh,
keen to sort of see friends anywhere. We've got a couple of different things that we're doing there, one of which is I organize a monthly call with all of my compatriots from across the United States who have positions similar to mine.
ah,
We're
ah.
doing a public-facing event, climate leaders at universities, which I'm very excited about. And we're actually going to meet for the first time in person. There are 13 of us right now. And so I just really appreciate the opportunity and again, love the enthusiasm all the way around. And just, it warms my heart to see this many people on a call like this. So I love every single one of the questions, love the dialogue, and just really appreciate all that you all do, I know, on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. In the chat, Toddi, Kat Ross from UT Dallas has said she appreciates your expertise, realism, and optimism on such a complex issue. You are an exceedingly cool person. And I simply repeat that is
My
all.
daughter would never say that.
Well, that's a different problem. Thank, thank you again. Thank you again,
You
Toddi.
bet.
Um,
Thanks, Brian.
but and friends, don't go just yet. Just to point out what's coming up next, we have more sessions scheduled through December right now on all kinds of topics, from enrollment to AI. If you'd like to go to the forum website, forum.futureofeducation.us, you can find out more, including links to our archive, which is now just absolutely immense. So in the meantime, thank you all for asking such great questions. Toddi praised you all, and she's absolutely right. Thank you for being a wonderful group to think with about this incredibly vast and important issue. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope you're safe and sound. Karen, I hope you feel better. It's good to see everybody. Please be well, work hard, and we'll see you next time online. Take care. Bye-bye.